Okay, in this video we're going to build a scroll rect that uses pooling. And the reason for that is if you have tons of items, like 10,000, 100,000 items, the list actually has to draw all those out. And in this case, we're only going to be doing 14 or 15 items at once, and we're just going to be recycling those so that we can have 100,000 items. These lists have about 10,000 items in them, and they perform perfectly. So this is for Unity editor scripting for your custom inspector or a custom editor window, but it really doesn't matter because we're going to be using GUI.BeginScrollView, which can be used for either in your game or in the editor. And if you go to this link on Unity's website, they will talk about scroll views and this problem, scroll view element pooling, and kind of gets into position-based scroll view pools. And you can read about how Unity describes the problem, although they don't provide any solutions as far as code goes. That's what this video is for. Okay, so I built a brand new Unity project starting off from scratch, and of course we'll have a folder called scripts, and let's make a new script. This is whatever script you have that's gonna need a list. Script with huge list, and let's also make a folder called editor. And this lets us create the editor scripts and do a script with huge list editor. And I'll open up both of those scripts. And so we got the one with the huge list and the huge list editor. The first thing we can do is make this an editor script. And we'll have to do using Unity Engine, or a Unity editor, and a custom editor type of script with a huge list. Alright, so we have the simple editor script set up. It doesn't use start and update. And if I go into Unity and I create a game object, a script with the huge list over here, and I add that script with the huge list to it, we could see it's there. We can't see anything as far as variables go, so let's add a let's just add a float number and make it public so that we can see it over there, and we should be able to see that number. And now let's do public override void on inspector GUI, and based on inspector GUI is going to draw the default inspector. So if we comment that out, we should be able to see the float field disappear and everything's ready to go. So now we want to build a huge list, and it could come from here, but also maybe it's only available in the inspector, and in that case we could just define a list here. I'm going to use a private list of integers and call it big list, and that's enumerable range 0 to 10,000 to list. Now the first thing we want to do on inspector GUI is a serialized object.update, and at the very end we're going to want to do a serialized object.apply modified properties, and everything can go in between here. And I want to wrap everything up into a editor GUI layout dot begin horizontal, and that means that we're also going to need to get an end horizontal. So we got the begin and the end on that horizontal, and so we'll wrap our content in the middle. Alright, so now I have a horizontal field, but there's nothing in it, so we need to put something in there. Let's do an editor GUI layout dot get control rect, which will return to let's see, we'll call it rect position, and that's equal to editor GUI layout dot get control rect. And now I want to see where that is, so let's do editor GUI dot draw rect, and we'll pass the rect position with a color of green, and let's see if we could find what that looks like in the editor. So we have the control rect, which is the area that that we can draw within, essentially inside of the inspector, and we're drawing a green. That's the area I'm going to want to draw this list at, the width of that, as well as the X and Y position. So now that we're inside of the horizontal layout, let's go ahead and do a GUI.box that wants a rect position, which is gonna we kind of want it here, but we just want it to be a little bit different. I'm gonna make a new rect and call it the rect box, and that's going to be equal to a new rect. We want it to be at the X and the Y position of the control rect. So rect pos.x and then rect pos.y. For the width of it, we're going to want it to be the same exact width as the inspector. So rect position.width, and you're going to want a static height on this. This tutorial doesn't cover a height that changes. It makes your pooling easier if you have a static height. So we're going to be using a static height of 250, and now we have a box for the rect box, and it wants a GUI content. So we could just do GUI content none, and I want to see the box in green. Let's see if it renders it with the default. Yeah, it sure did. It rendered it with the default box GUI style. And we need to push down the editor now because it's obviously gone a little bit below the bottom of the inspector. Okay, to fix that, let's go to the begin horizontal and do a GUI layout dot height, and we'll set the height to 250 so that it's the horizontal group is the same height as the box. In fact, it might be nice to give it some padding. Unity likes to give 2 pixels padding, so we could do something like 254 just so that the horizontal group is a little bit bigger than the scroll rect area. So now let's take a look at that, and now we have our nice area where we're going to put our scroll list in. Now I already have a huge list to put items in, so at this point, since we're done drawing the box and we're ready to put the scroll rect in, so we could do a GUI.BeginScrollView, and it needs a position for, it needs 2 rects. It needs a rect position and a rect for the view rect, and it also needs a vector 2 for the scroll position. So the vector 2 will just make appear as a public variable. A public vector 2 scroll position is equal to new vector 2 0, and let's make 2 new rects. Well, we already have a perfect rect for the scroll view, and that is the rect box. So now we need the scroll position for the vector 2 so it can keep track of where the scroll bars are at, and then we're going to need a larger size rect for the content that we're going to be scrolling. Now this is called view rect, so let's just do a new rect called view rect, and that's going to be equal to almost the same as rect box. So, but let's do a new rect, and it's rect box. The starting X position and the starting Y position should be fine. The width of it should be fine. We could do a rect box dot width, and the height is where it's gonna need a variable. For the moment, let's just do something like 10,000, and now we should be able to finish this GUI.BeginScrollView. Passing in the view rect, but if we've done that, we're going to need to do a end scroll view as well. And I don't believe we need that box. It was good to help us figure out where we want it at. but we know that it's in the right position now, and we can see it right here in the editor. Now I might opt for drawing a white rect at that position. Green's a nice color too, but let's just go for white, and that way we can kind of have an area for our scroll box that's easy to see. And if we look at the options for this begin scroll view, we can see there's 4 definitions for always show the horizontal, always show the vertical, GUI style horizontal. Alright, so we're going to do the big one here with 4 of them. And then we're going to need a bool for always show horizontal false, always show vertical true, and it wants a GUI style for the horizontal and a GUI style for the vertical. So we got a false, true, and then 2 GUI styles. So false, true, we're going to do a GUI style.none for the horizontal bar, and we're going to do GUI skin.vertical scroll bar for the vertical bar. That's going to allow the horizontal bar to disappear, and we're left with nothing except a broken bar that's not moving. The reason why it's not moving is because when you call begin scroll view, it wants a vector 2. So we're going to have to say scroll position is equal to GUI.BeginScrollView, and back over here we should be able to move this thing up and down 10,000 pixels. Now if we do a debug.log on the scroll position, we'll be able to find out just how much that moves when you do a single click. And we could see here it is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, so it's going 10 pixels per click or per increment of the scroll view. Okay, now let's do editor GUI.label field. It wants a rect position. We'll have to make a new rect for this. This is going to be the content position is equal to a new rect that is on the rect box .x, 0f for the y-axis, and then we'll do rect box .width for the width of it, and the height is going to be 16. The default height for one line in a Unity inspector is 16, and it likes to have a margin between them of 2 pixels, so that's 18. But we're going to do the content position of 16, and that's the height of it. That's the default Unity height, and let's take a look at what that looks like. So it's at the very top of the inspector. It's a little bit slim because it doesn't include the padding, the 2 pixel margin. So we should make our text 18 so that it includes that 2 pixel margin. It's probably 1 pixel for the top and the bottom. But back over here we could see the hello world, and now the text is not it was too high. It was at the very top of the window. Okay, so we drew the first item here, but we want to draw all 10,000 of these. So first of all, we need to know how many fit into our window, and that is going to be 18 divided by 250. So that's going to be 14 items visible on the screen at once. Now, most likely you could see 15 if you get it positioned correctly. So one variable that we're going to need here is an integer, which is view count, and this is the number that are going to be possible to be visible in your view at once. And we won't be drawing any more items than this. We're just going to be pooling these 15 items and recycling them to draw all 10,000 in the list. Because we do that, it'll be super fast. The next thing we want to know is we're going to need to know what the first index of this array is that needs to be rendered. So out of these items, the first one, what does that correspond to out of this list's index? So, and we're going to call this an integer of first index, and that's going to be equal to scroll position dot y divided by 18, and we want an integer from that number. Now the reason why we're doing that is because our scroll position dot y, one click down it's 10, two clicks down it's 20, so these items don't fit perfectly in with one click essentially. Alright, so we have the first index. Let's do a debug.log of the first index just to see what kind of just to see if we're making progress here. So at the very top it's at 0. When I'm at the very top of the list, it should be showing index 0. If I click down once, it's still 0, which it should be because I could still see index 0 here. YouTube probably doesn't show it because it got lost in video compression. But there's a pixel here, 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 and here from the hello world line of text. It is still the first line because it's 18 high. And when I click down once, it only brings the X position to 10. So we need to get all the way up to 20 before that item disappears. And now the first item in the list is item number 1. So that is working correctly, and the index is working as it should. So now we're going to need to move this content position, and we'll move hello world with it. It needs to come down here because it's going to be using these variables. So the content position is, we still want it to be lined up with the X. We're not moving its horizontal. We do need to set where it's at vertically based on where the scroll bar is. So this is going to be the first index multiplied by 18. And now we need to put an F at the end of this one, make sure it's a float of course, but the content position will always be 18. Each item is 18 high. And let's see if hello world can follow the scroll bar. So it sure is. As we're scrolling, it doesn't matter where we go, that hello world is going to be rendered at the top of our view. Now it might be rendered like this with a little bit sticking out because we're at one of those 20 positions, and this is 18 high. But no matter how far we go, it still is going to be rendering that on the screen. So now we're ready to draw our array. And that means we can get rid of hello world, and we're going to do a for loop. And don't use a for each. Use a actual for loop. It's going to be for I equals the first index. I is less than mathf.min, our list count, so big list.count, first index plus view count. So the reason we're doing this is it comes to rendering the end of the list. It's saying that at the end of the list, whichever one's minimum, because you might come to the end of the list first, but usually it's just going to be the first index plus the view count. So our very first number plus 15, because that's all that's going to be rendered to the screen at one time. So we can proceed to finish our for loop, and that is to do an I++. So the maximum that this loop is going to be 15 times. So not that heavy on the CPU to loop this 15 times versus 10,000. And now what we can do is just let's make a GUI label, GUI.label, and the rect is content position. And we're gonna go ahead and just pass in big list I, and that needs to we need to turn that into a string because that's a list of integers. And once we're done doing that, we're going to need to increase the item position, or the content position dot y plus equals 18. That way it draws these items on top of each other vertically instead of writing over each other's content. And let's take a look back at the inspector and see what we got. Well, at the top of the list we got 0. And if I click down, it's going through the list. You can see I can cut numbers off up here because that's exactly how it should look. Because these 10 increments don't match up with the 18 size of each one of the items. And I can scroll down and I'm at 555. So there's some kind of a problem here that the view rect is set to a static size. Now these need to be 18 pixels high for each item. So we should probably do a big list dot count multiplied by 18. And if we've done our calculation correctly and we scroll to the bottom of the list, we'll see 9,999 because that is a 10,000th item when you're starting at 0. Now we're doing a debug.log somewhere, so that's going to slow down my performance. Let's get this out of here. And at this time we should be done with the video because this is a pooling list. And it's going super fast. I can of course scroll through 10,000 items as fast as I want, and it's also displaying all of the content out of that list correctly, every single one of the items in the correct position, as if they were actually all in this list, even though they're not. So that completes this tutorial, and for my case it was this character creator that is duplicating wows, and wow has like 10,000 8,000 belts here in this list, and so I needed a super fast way to pull out all 8,000 belts, boots, all the different slots that you can equip for your character. And here you can scroll through and equip whatever equipment onto your character you want. A real nice character creator similar to WoW Model Viewer. But that's my application. You've got a different one, but at least I've provided the code right here for how to get a simple pooling scroll rect where you don't need an asset from the asset store or anything like that. Just make sure you set a static height, because if you don't, things get a little bit more complicated, as you can assume. But having a static height here, as well as a static height on all of our individual items in the list, make this quite easy and a very small script. A lot better to just build this yourself than to try to import some big complicated asset to manage a pooling scroll rect for you. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.